Hello and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast, a community of amazing people who love talking about and sharing their love about the details behind making games, whether or not they're actually based in London. I'm your host, I'm Oscar Clark, he, him pronouns, and I am on a quest to understand everything you want to know about game dev, but never dared to ask. And I am delighted today to be joined by Brandon Cole. Brandon, nice to meet you. Tell us all about yourself and your background and a little bit about Into Games, please.
Amazing, really enthusiastic, emphatic intro there. I really love that a lot. Huge thank you.
I'll get you hyped up, don't worry, that's my job here.
Oh, you've done a brilliant job so far. I am ready. So as you mentioned, Oscar, I'm Brandon. I work over at Into Games, one of the founders of the organization. He was the first person to join after Declan CEO joined. I've been there for coming on about 3.5 years now. My background before that, not a huge amount really to tell. Into Games was my first foray into the games industry, but had some work before that really working in social enterprise, so service design, supporting organizations who want to have bigger, greater social impact, working with education to better build relationships with employers and improve outcomes for young people. So my background really is actually in kind of social impact, social enterprise, and supporting vulnerable groups, and found my way thankfully into games in the creative industries, which is really a nice marrying of the things I love.
But let's pursue that, because you've come from that kind of social enterprise kind of mindset. You're clearly passionate about how do we make sure we look at skills, diversity, engagement, opportunity. There's a whole bunch of really powerful stuff. But why games?
So I think initially, actually, for me, I had a real passion for games as myself as a young person. And the creative industries more widely. I've been a writer for all of my life, and studied film at university actually.
Oh yeah.
And really into the kind of like film theory. So understanding the kind of like political, religious, gender implications. What films can tell us about the world. So I've always been someone who's been a real lover of the arts, and games for me, I think, partly because I think I really liked the fact that it was an industry that wasn't taken seriously, and I really liked talking about how perhaps it should be from both a business perspective now more so, but at the time from an artistic perspective.
But you say that. I mean, this is the thing: is that we here we are the single largest form of digital entertainment on the planet. Single largest. We're bigger than music and movies. Combined. There was a point where we were bigger than home entertainment, music and movies. In fact, there was more. It was more video game content viewed online than HBO, Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc. combined. And yet, like you say, we're not always taken seriously as an art form, let alone as a commercial endeavour. There are still, I still know people who get told, "Yeah, that game thing you're doing, when are you getting a proper job?"
Exactly, yeah, and we're still battling that on all fronts as an organization, from the early stages of a young person first finding out that, a games career is possible, all the way up to trying to kind of fight for the legitimacy of the sector at, a national and policy level, at all areas, the games industry isn't being taken as seriously as it should be. And I think there's a few reasons why that's the case. But in terms of kind of my initial interest in games and wanting to work in games, it came from the artistic perspective. And as I started to work into games, I was really kind of drawn by the idea of the fact that ultimately it's one of very few industries where somebody can make a steady salary as an artist or a steady salary as a writer. It's definitely a difficult industry to break into, but actually for a young person, what an exciting prospect that they can actually find a steady job where they earn a decent wage, and they can follow their dreams of being a character artist or a concepts artist or a writer or any of these amazing creative endeavors. And I'm all for, if anything, widening the opportunities for young people to be able to kind of explore their creativity. So that's the kind of thing that really interested me about games.
I'm with you. I mean, we actually had Michael from Rising Games, who's an FE educator in Cambridge, so FE level training. It's interesting hearing, we were talking to him about how do you train somebody to be a games person. But I think what's interesting for me is if we look at this as a chain of activity, I'm a massive fan of what you guys were doing with the Kickstart scheme. I mean, it's genuinely huge fan, and the fact that there's not government support for that at the moment, if I understand correctly, is gutting, utterly gutting. Honestly, we had the best interviews, the most diverse interviews. We took on 2 people, and we're a tiny, relatively tiny people. We're like 12, 14 people. I think we're 14 people now. And we took on 2 people as Kickstarter schemes, and we kept one of them on. And they are an aspiring producer right now, because we were able to take them on, give them the chance to get started, and just be sure that they had the skills, or in fact, to be honest, we were being essentially having their salary covered for, is it 24, 28 hours a week or something, I think it was. And that then meant that we could have that person ready prime time and be able to, work with us. So to my mind, you nailed it with the accessibility for students. I mean, how did you feel that scheme went? Do you think we'll see something like that in the future?
Yeah, really interesting. So just to add a bit of context there as to the
Yeah.
Kickstart scheme, essentially it was, a big government-backed program that happened at the start of COVID, essentially to try and basically bring a huge influx of entry-level talent across the UK in various different sectors, and to basically do some risk mitigation for organizations that perhaps were worried about taking on entry-level talent at a time when business was, there were concerns about, the future of different organizations. And essentially that covered, as you said, 24 hours a week at minimum wage, and then employers could top that up, either top up the hourly rate or top up the hours. And we essentially acted as like a gateway to that, specifically for the games industry, with some support from Yuki to manage that as well. We actually have a report coming out soon about the impact of that, and I think actually across the UK that supported just over 200 entry level roles into the UK games industry. And when you compare that to TIGA's report that they did around the number of people that started and the growth of the industry over that period, I think it actually accounted for something like nearly 5% of the entire growth of the
Not
industry
surprised.
came directly from the Kickstart scheme. And that must be a huge percentage of overall entry level roles in the UK games industry at that time. So and looking at the data, actually a significant percentage of those still work at the same organizations. And we saw teams from major UK studios as well as tiny 3-person indie teams, the vast majority of all who kept people on. So I think it was just that case of like, organizations needed a little bit of that risk mitigation, they just needed something to get them over the line to say yes, essentially.
But I think it's more than that, actually. And I go back to the talent that we got to see. Had we had the bandwidth, we would have taken on more, but we just couldn't. But I literally cannot stress how good it was to have some really good, diverse talent. People who didn't look like me in the room, people who didn't necessarily come from the same economic status that my background, my childhood had to offer. Not that I was particularly, I'm classic middle class. We weren't particularly wealthy, but the point was that we've been able to see much more people from a more working class, more kind of diverse backgrounds, as well as diverse identities, and that has been massive. Now this is, I suppose, where we, in some ways, maybe games is a little bit caught, and we are not great. That's not true. That's not fair. We're not as good as we should be. Let's put it that way, in terms of diversity. And one of the contributing factors, I suspect, is educational bar. There is an educational bar in games. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, so I think there's a huge amount of factors as to why it isn't as good as it should be, and I definitely agree with you. The Kickstart scheme was great at bringing in a lot more kind of diverse,
Honestly, it's the
representative
best scheme
workforce
for
at
that
that
I've ever
level.
seen.
Every single person that came on through that scheme was age 16 to 24 and on universal credit before they got that job. So I think definitely there is an aspect to the diversity in the industry being related to, as you said, a very high bar and standard that's set. But I think it's important that we need to move as an industry past that and bring into the discourse like the fact that we're Hitmarker just released a report recently that said that they've recorded the lowest ever entry level roles available in UK games. Something like 8.5% of current roles available in UK games are entry level, which is really low across the creative industries more widely. So this is like, not an exclusive to games problem, but in the creative and tech industries, definitely games are kind of one of the kind of leading culprits. And also the fact that there's a belief that to work in games, you have to understand how games are made and that you have to have had previous experience in that field. When in actual fact, there are so many transferable skills from other sectors. And, the industry desperately needs great producers. And there are so many great producers and project managers from across various sectors that would be brilliant in games that aren't getting
It's
noticed.
an interesting one. Oh, I mean, let's dive into that project management meets producer thing, because there is I think there's a bunch of kind of questions about how a game needs to be made, which I think actually the transferable skills from games to other projects is actually probably stronger, I would argue, almost than coming the other way. Just my personal take on it. But the producer thing is really interesting. So I've worked with producers who came from, say, film, or they've come from mainstream IT. I've actually done, before I joined games, a very long time ago, I was involved in designing kind of platform tools. Actually, I did a lot of work with telcos, even when I first started in games. It was designing telco grade delivery platform for mobile Java games back in the day, and before that I was working on an online gaming service on called Wireplay on dial-up modems. Yes, I'm that old. But the approach to program management, approach to project management in more mainstream IT conditions is incredibly different, and often needs a very different mindset and personality type. So when you're talking about the kind of like I would argue there's something about the technology bar, sure, but there's also a culture bar. What is it? I'm trying to find the right way to word it, because I think there's something about the way the Kickstarter scheme approached it that meant that those barriers were able to be got over, because of the space we then had to be able to find the right people, the types of people who would fit into our, in our case, our culture. Now, that was people who loved games, people who wanted to understand how to make games. Very different from if I wanted to say a coder. We didn't take on some people maybe who would have a more kind of structured way of approaching things. So again, I'm probably rambling a bit now, but do you see where I'm coming from? It's like, is it okay that we have a cultural need of the way we operate, or is it that we're overly protective about the way we look at these things? Sorry, does that make sense?
Yes, it does completely, and I think it's both. And this is coming from my perspective of I'm not a game developer, but I have a privileged position where I work with studios from the largest to the smallest, and have probably more privileged access to how they work and how they do things and operate than most. From across the UK. So from my perspective, I think it's both a good thing and a bad thing. I think there's an amazing element to the fact that the industry is, collaborative and creative, and has this culture around, we enjoy what we do and we enjoy what we make, and we consume the thing that we make ourselves. I think that's an amazing thing to be behind that and to love that. And that doesn't exist in many industries at all. So I think that's incredible. And I do think that plays an element into why the games industry largely cares a lot about volunteering and supporting education, because there's that desire and that passion to share back the thing that they love to others who also care about it. I do also think that it is a crutch in some way, because I think it's closing off people who could be great for the industry, who feel like they can't get into it because they don't fit the right mold of what the industry wants.
They're not
so I
one
think
of
it's
us.
a shame. Exactly. When there's people out there with the great, both soft and hard skills to be able to work in games, who, may be aware of games and enjoy them, but wouldn't consider themselves a, gamer TM, that would be brilliant in the industry. I know a few really great concept artists who work in the UK games industry who do not play video games. They don't play games, but for them, being a concept artist in the games industry is the best way for them to be able to explore new ideas, to work with a collaborative and creative team, to work to these awesome creative briefs where they get to explore various different worlds that you just don't get in any other industry. So I do think that there's some lessons to be learned there, and that the industry is missing out on great people from an expectation that
Yeah,
they should have a
I'll
love
give you
for
an
the thing that
example.
they're
I
making.
mean, I know that there was a particular place where I was doing some work where they had artists who came from an architecture background, and they were making 3D models in an architectural mindset. And in an architectural context, you're not really worried about the efficiency of the design. You're not worried about pixel count. You're not worried about multiple objects in scene. So I wasn't expecting that. So anyway, so this particular arc came in, but because it was designed by people who hadn't got that background, they didn't know the tricks. They didn't know the efficiencies. They didn't know about simplification and count and polygon count, and the impact that has in a real-time process. It's less so nowadays than it used to be, but culling triangles is not something that was automatic at the time. So hours and days were lost in the process. But we are getting better at the tech. The tech is becoming more accessible. The tech is, the particular skill sets are trainable, I would argue. And so I think what I'm trying to get to is are we good enough at sharing those insider tricks? How much share? I think we're quite a collaborative space, but are we helping create a transition between I can know how to do the basic tool to I know how to do it in a good way to knowing how to do it the best way?
Yeah, so I think internally, and as an industry, once you're in, I think definitely very good. People are very good at sharing knowledge and the tools and the tricks of the trade and the things that they do. I think the problem is, or the challenges is, I think that the there isn't this. There's an expectation that when somebody comes into a job in the games industry, that they know exactly what to do and that they can start doing it straight away. And there's various reasons, partly cultural, partly due to things like project milestones, deadlines, budgets, all of those things. And again, I don't think those problems can be solved, I think, but there's an expectation you have to know exactly how to do everything from day one, and that there is some learning and some things that you do along the way. But actually, I think that there needs to be a better and more embedded culture around learning and development, and the idea that we can bring people in from different industries and different parts of the creative industries are out with, and know that we can teach them the skills that they need to be able to work efficiently in the games industry, making games. Because actually, bringing an architect in, as you said, level designers learn from architects. They learn that trade, that process of
There's a
how
whole
buildings are
UX
designed
in architecture, which I only started to get my head around when I was working on PlayStation Home. The idea that actually the spatial world is an incredibly informative, process, and looking at flow, looking at movement, looking at space, looking at a whole bunch of things. Even if it was just basic, over there is a thing that looks like a fancy playground. There's a thing over there that looks like a castle. There's a thing over there that looks like a jungle. I immediately know if I want to go find a game where I'm going and what to expect. I don't have to be told.
Exactly. And architects and city builders and planners have been doing that for hundreds of years, and games level designers have been doing it for 25. So there's a missed opportunity there, I think, in bringing folks in. And in the same way, talking about producers and project managers, sure, there's tools that you need to learn how to use, but you can teach somebody how to use a tool very easily, but you can't teach somebody the collective knowledge they've learned from a different sector overnight. Bringing these people in with fresh ideas, fresh understandings of how to do things is how you create better things. It's how you create better, fairer, kinder organizations that do more interesting and progressive things. And kind of going back to the original thing around the legitimacy of the games industry, I think part of the reason that's been held back is because of that. It doesn't accept and acknowledge and soak in the ideas and concepts and ways of working of other industries in the same way that other parts of the sector might, which means that it can be often people in the games industry think that they know how to do things best for them, and that they need to build something specifically for the games industry because it has its own special exclusive challenges, which in some specific cases it does, but actually many of those challenges are shared across many other industries, and better discourse across those would actually, I think, create, a better, more legitimate industry that understands its big challenges much better.
I'm completely with you. In fact, I mean, I'm sure I've said it on this podcast many a time, which is, we deliberately recruit for people who don't look like me. Because I don't want to be sat in a room of me agreeing with me. I want people who are going to challenge me, people who are going to come at it from a different angle, who provide. And as you said, the creativity that comes out of having different people in a room, the not removing the echo chamber, I think is really incredible. Now, you've got to have a common set of endeavours. You've got to have a common target, goal, understanding what success looks like. But that's what leadership's about. That's what good structures are about. And unless you're inviting in, and frankly, taking an honest view of what we're trying to do and why, how on earth can we provide games for a global audience? Because that's what we're doing. If we don't have a global mindset,
exactly. And I'm glad you touched on leadership as well, because I think that's another kind of challenge to the legitimacy of the games industry and some of its current challenges that it's facing, is that actually the games industry really needs great leaders and great managers. It doesn't understand, I think, quite yet how to, it hasn't quite matured enough yet to understand that, like, being a great manager and being a great leader does not mean being an experienced developer, and that there's many people who
but there's so many industries that fail on that one, aren't there? It's interesting. I actually genuinely like that you brought that, because it takes me back to a conversation I had in BT, British Telecom of all places, where they were just trying to get their heads around the fact that the only form of progression they had when at the time was that you would progress as a manager. You couldn't progress as an expert in your field. So what happened is you had people who are really good programmers or really good at something specific, and then you stop them doing the thing they're really good at, and you get them to do something they're really not good at. I mean, it is the Peter principle. You're promoted to your highest form of incompetence. Yes, that was called the Peter principle before a certain, I'm not going to say racist, I'm not going to say whatever, I'll let you make your own mind up about the cartoon character I'm referring to. Anyway, sorry, tirade there. But that thing about actually understanding that skills have a path, leadership is a skill. Culture is defined by leaders, and culture is how you make sure that everybody else can do their job to the best of their ability. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling again. I'd love to know what you think about that sort of aspect of things.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. And I think one of the challenges here is around learning and development and leadership development. There's the wonderful. I'm going to say her name wrong now. That's terrible. Mel, who is used to work at Silver Rain Games, who's now heading up Games Leadership Network, has addressed and understands this challenge, and that's what she was trying to do at Silver Rain Games as well. Was around kind of like, okay, right, the games industry in the UK does not have anywhere near as much diverse leaders as it should have. And there's a few ways that we can go around, solving that challenge. Like we look at the UK census all the time and see how, vastly underrepresentative the games industry is, many different areas. And we talk about the 30% of women currently work in the workforce, and I think 12% from minority ethnicity groups, but that's across the entire industry. That number becomes much, much smaller when you get to a senior leadership level, much smaller. And especially when you look at things like class as well, like the UK games industry is very, very middle class. Two-thirds of the UK workforce had parents who came from a managerial background. And I think something nearly like 30% of the UK workforce went to either a selective or fee-paying school. And the only industries in the creative industries that are higher than that are architecture and journalism. which makes sense.
It does.
So but when you start to look in senior leadership level, the percentage of people who are working at C-suite director level in UK games industry, the percentage of those who are white, middle class, or who went to an independent or fee-paying school is astronomical. It's a huge percentage, the majority. So the industry has this problem, and this isn't exclusive to games either. This is across various industries. Most industries, this is the case. But for games like this, the way that the Mel kind of approached this challenge was either we can't make games diverse games leaders overnight, so we need to either develop them from the ground up, and build them up, or we need to take people who are from diverse groups who are already experts in their field, bring them in and say, we're going to train you up as leaders. Let's take a great narrative designer, let's take a great concept artist, and let's bring them in and help them build their team, help them develop their leadership skills, their management skills, help them build the culture of the team. And that's unfortunately just not happening at the moment, and the tides are changing.
There have been some attempts. I mean, for example, I know Tara Code Coven have been doing a lot of work in the last few years to try and create an environment specifically for empowering women in games, which I think is really sort of smart. That kind of sharing of knowledge. I'm very lucky that my business partner happens to be one of those people who's been in a leadership role for most of her career, starting her own studio straight out of university. So I do feel lucky that I'm in a situation where I happen to be, our company is specifically more balanced than most. Doesn't mean we're perfect by any means, but I think that we want to make sure that I'll give you an example. So one of the things I'm a conversation I had with Nina, a friend of mine, on a previous podcast, came down to a slightly different end to the bit that you guys have been solving with Kickstart, which is basically, as well as the problem getting people who have diverse backgrounds into games, this getting people to that leadership role, getting people to get to lead, as in the technical lead, or kind of senior roles, that skill set, advancement, internal training, we feel is currently not absent, but not as well supported as it needs to be. So we have a kind of current industry-wide problem, I think exacerbated in the UK with Brexit, of we're not training juniors to become seniors to become leads. In fact, I've got a friend of mine who was involved in designing the VGTR project, who we're having chats about how we can find ways to help address this. I know it's not really my thing, but I'll probably want to reach out to you at the time we get down the line on that. But my feeling is that there is a fundamental problem, partly down to the infrastructure we have as an industry in the UK, and specifically the UK I'm thinking of. Namely, most teams are too small to have HR training teams. When you're talking about 15, 20, 40 people max for most studios in the UK, having a dedicated training team, nigh on impossible. Especially when they're disincentivized, I would argue, to train somebody up, because what will happen when they're trained up, somebody with bigger pockets will go and hire them. I know it's not as simple as that, and hopefully your team are motivated by getting you a game out, but at the end of the day, are we doing people a disservice? I mean, I'll ask you, what do you think? Are we doing people a disservice because we're not providing a framework for you to go from nothing to in the games industry, from being in the games industry to being a junior to senior to lead, and then leadership roles from there?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So I think you hit on a really good point there about the smaller organizations, and I do think that is an interesting challenge of its own, because actually for us as an organization, a lot of the time we see those smaller organizations actually putting in more effort than the larger
I
organizations
agree.
to try and build an inclusive work culture, to try and create vocational routes or entry level routes into their organizations, to support people with learning and development, to be more ethical and caring businesses. Take yours truly, the Games PR agency, for example. They went through the entire process of certifying themselves as a B Corp. They're one of 2 organizations that I know of in the games industry that are B Corp certified, and they're a team of, I think, around 7 people.
Yeah.
So these smaller organizations often are the ones who are actually doing this really interesting work and building these inclusive and progressive organizations. So I do think it presents an interesting challenge, especially when you think about in other sectors that, businesses are normally, you have people who are working in the development side of things, but typically you've got people who are very business savvy minded who want to set up their own small organization. You've got people who perhaps understand the ins and outs of running a business and the operations side and how you support your staff, who've maybe come from previous startup backgrounds or worked in other organizations. Whereas a lot of the time, these games teams are kind of growing from just developers, right, who just want to make something. So often they're growing their development team, they're building the game, but they're not actually thinking about themselves as a business, that actually has various different moving parts to it that need to be, organized and supported by someone. So it means lots of things are being done in various different little places by people, but you don't have one dedicated person who looks after the business side of things rather than just the making of the game. So I think that is an interesting challenge. But I would say at the same time that, like, I think, from an entry level perspective, the sector's not doing anywhere near as much as it should be, to its own detriment, to bring in fresh entry level talent.
I will defend us a little bit, only because I've got a vested interest in this defence.
Of
So,
course.
hey, you got to play the part you can. We're involved with a couple of some indie accelerator programs. Obviously, you've got people like Yuki and the Yuki one, and Dan, and various other people we know there, we're good friends with, who are running that one. We're working with a team called Indie Lab. In fact, Nina, I was referring to earlier, was one of the people on the Indie Lab program that we run and design, working with the Indie Lab team. So Indie Lab is actually an accelerator program that's come from film and TV, and they got myself and Ella involved to help design the game's specific course. And we just announced, they are in the process of recruiting right now for one being run out of Scotland. So we'll be helping with that process as well. So what I think is really interesting about, again, that was me doing my bit of pitching, but I mean, it's more that what I want to try and get across with this is I think that there are some things out there for startups. I think accelerator programs for startups are really, really interesting. And obviously, some of the things we cover when we do that are things like culture and reinforcing that culture is the team and diversity is essential. It's not a luxury. It's not about pandering in any way, shape or form, which I get accused of. It's actually about doing the best person for the job is somebody who can provide the right voice. And that's not just about, do they agree with you? In fact, the opposite. I want people with different backgrounds. Now, we have those conversations with those groups. We also try to get them to think about what it is they're trying to be as organisations. Most important thing is, what does success look like to you? And I think this feeds into what you were saying earlier about making sure that, I think a lot of these indie studios that we are adoring, it's part of their identity, a part of what makes them have the chance to succeed is that they've spent time thinking about what success looks like to them. That isn't just the money. It's about being that ethical, that diverse, that supportive, that authentic organisation. Are you seeing the people who engage with you are reflecting in that, or are you seeing challenges, people accepting that that's an important thing?
So I think the accelerators is a good point that you brought up, and obviously there's also the Tentacle Zone accelerator with Payload.
Sorry,
which is,
apologies. I should have mentioned that one as well. Yeah, Tentacle Zones are great.
Is another perfect example of a small organisation going above and beyond to support the
beyond.
ecosystem in a
I've
sustainable
done a
way,
few talks there as well, and I think Ella did one recently.
Creative UK has a games accelerator program as well, and they're very focused on the business side.
That's the one I'm referring to, actually. Yeah, that's the one that they're doing with the Yuki guys. I meant, sorry, I should have said, yeah, England Creative or UK Creative, whatever it is. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and then as you said, there's one, there is one called Indie Lab, and then there's
that's
also
us.
obviously things like the UK Games Fund as well, which is more about the funding side, but
Yes.
they offer business support and help businesses mature as well.
Yeah.
So there are those things out there, and I think super important. But sorry, I didn't quite understand your question. Sorry, could you clarify your
Oh, I was
question?
just saying. So obviously, in these accelerator programs, we think it's important that we get them to understand what success looks like, and that part of that success is the culture of their company. Part of that success is the authenticity and diversity that they represent. Um, and it strikes me that you're probably going to be encountering more teams that get that than not, because they're engaging with you. But I was wondering if you do get any pushback from people who don't quite understand that.
Yeah, we get a lot of pushback for the things that we're talking about, and generally there are a lot of major organizations that do support our work and believe in what we do and believe in the mission themselves as an organization and in what we want to do. There's a lot of, as I said, kind of, we see a lot of energy and excitement and enthusiasm from the smaller organizations to try and do things a little bit differently. I think it's quite good as a games company, because they're born from this piece of entertainment and art they're creating, that I think kind of like they live and breathe a lot of the time authenticity and creativity and culture from the things that they're making naturally. So I think games organizations are very good at like living and breathing what it is that they do, and letting people know publicly who they are and what they're about. But in terms of kind of the piece around like building a more representative sector and caring about those things, and the culture being at the heart of diversity and representation being at the heart of their culture, I think that there's a lot of talk and not anywhere near as much
Not
action
as
as there
much, yeah.
should be.
Which is why I was pushing the question. To be honest, that was my bad form attempt to try and push us into that part of the way, because let's face it, we haven't been seen in the best possible light of late. And there are certain specific organisations we don't necessarily need to go into too much detail on, because I'm not anyone to talk, because I don't know their backgrounds. I can see the news items. I haven't had personal experience of that. I'm lucky. Lucky, sorry, also word I'm not going. I happen to be that age group, that identity that doesn't tend to get too much visibility of the hassle, harassment, frustrations, glass ceilings, etc. But I know people who do a lot, and I find it deeply frustrating and upsetting when I find out about these things. When I witness people being dismissed in a room, and I've had situations where, we've walked into a room and someone says hello to me and then just ignores Ella. That's not okay. That's not okay. And okay, that happens everywhere. I get that, but it's not okay. So, do you think we're able to deal with that? Are we dealing with an embedded culture that needs a serious kick? Or, see, I'm a bit more optimistic about it. I'm laying out. I want to give you a chance to talk about it. But let's come back, because I'm a bit more enthusiastic than I'm letting out at this point in time, just to help lead you into the thought. Where do you think we currently are in terms of this negativity and negative culture?
I think things should be a lot better than they are, but things should be a lot better in almost in likely every single industry and in most parts of the world. That these challenges are not games industry specific, they're big societal changes. There's only so much that we can do as an industry and as a sector to tackle those. There's lots that we can do that we're not doing that we should be doing, but many of these are big, much larger conversations and questions that about society at large, about how we support and empower those from marginalized groups to be able to realize their full potential, and how we dismantle the frameworks of patriarchy to make sure that everybody has, the right opportunities at the right time. So, these, and class as well, how we break down class inequality, and ensure that anyone from a working class background has the same opportunity as their friend from a private school. These are big questions that aren't exclusive to games. In terms of how games fares against other industries, I'm a little more cynical than you, naturally, given the work that I do. I think it's a twofold thing. I think in lots of places we're doing really well. So, the games industry has a massive culture of social entrepreneurialism and volunteering. There are so many schemes and initiatives born from developers who wanted to see change, who have built successful organizations and social enterprises out of that. That doesn't happen everywhere. And at the same time, we're one of, if not the only creative industry that at the moment maps its representation across the sector every single 2 years, which means that the games industry and those working in it have a very good vocabulary in terms of talking about the challenges of the industry, like how many women work in games, how many from minority ethnicity groups, how many from working class. Like the words, the things I'm saying now, like, if I were in
And
another
neurodiversity,
industry
of
and
course.
talking, yeah, exactly. Every single intersectionality, most people have a really good understanding of where we sit, which I think does us a lot of favors. Like, we can have this conversation and know that most folks who are listening to this aren't gonna be shocked by these numbers. They're gonna understand them and know them because of the work of the UK census, which other creative industries and out with don't do. So I do think we're doing well in lots of places. I think the people who work in games a lot of people do really care about change and about making big systemic changes and differences. They are building their own initiatives to make that happen where things aren't happening more widely. And people have a really good understanding of where the challenges lie and for whom. And then the other part as well is that the industry is very good at not pulling up the ladder behind it and giving back and sharing its knowledge to young people as well. Our work wouldn't be possible as an organization without the hundreds of volunteers that we rely on throughout the year to support that work in all of the different projects and initiatives that we run. That, again, wouldn't be possible in other industries. Something like the video games ambassadors, that's, there's nearly 1,000 volunteers on there who regularly support and volunteer on projects. I can't imagine there being a
Yeah, I've been a
culture
bit
like that
rubbish.
in the film
I've signed
industry.
up ages ago. I've done a tiny amount, so I need to do more.
You do your own things in other places and in other ways to support all of that stuff, so I wouldn't worry. But I can't see, I don't see a culture in film that would allow something like that to be successful, or a platform like that would be successful. So the games has a lot of things going for it, but it also has a huge number of kind of challenges and problems as well. I think those will slowly over time be lessened as we do kind of build a more representative and diverse workforce, but we can't rely on inspiring kids in schools to fix our problems now.
And I'm just checking. So again, I talked about how I don't. I should also highlight that I have been in those situations where, like, for example, one of the telcos I worked with, over 5 years, I had 13 bosses, and I took 2 to HR for bullying. So I might look like this. It doesn't mean I haven't, the perfect, seamless career path. And I think that maybe that helped me try to see things in a different light, because I don't want anyone who works for me to ever have to go through that again. I've dealt with the sandwich form of compliment, true answer, compliment, and the true answer being very negative. That I've had to deal with a lot, and whilst that's not specific to diversity, it is something I think every cultures in any organization, to get the most benefit out of a person, needs to understand about empowerment, needs to understand the difference between empowering and just chucking responsibility on people, and also making sure that you can have clear communication and support. I think as organizations, we're not generally trained to be managers. We're not generally trained to deal with difficult employees or difficult managers. We have to find ways of learning those things. And I think one of the things that I'd like to see is to find ways that we can help people grow. In fact, actually, we do this as it happens anyway. We do all of the stuff that we preach. You and I preach about at this point when we talk about communities. If you look at what priorities are from community managers to reduce toxicity, to encourage positivity, to increase engagement, I'd argue we've actually got a lot of the tools inside our organisation, or inside the gaming industry itself. And maybe we're just not learning enough lessons from our own behaviour. I mean, does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think definitely. I definitely don't think the games industry doesn't have the tools or the resources to solve its challenges for sure. And it's, why it's frustrating often coming into conversations where people talk about the inability to start an internship program or to build new
Yeah.
structures or support things in different ways. It's quite clear that there are the resources and tools available for organizations to do that. They're choosing a different path for whatever reason. So I definitely think the industry has the ability and the skills. It's one of the most highly talented, productive, hardest working industries in the world. So it certainly does have the ability and the knowledge to be able to solve its challenges for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not denying that. It has some of the most intelligent, creative people on the planet working in games. So it's definitely not out with the abilities of the workforce. Yeah, there are big systemic changes that need to happen, and organizations do need to rethink differently from the ground up how they do things. Talking about things like, as you said, about learning and development and supporting diverse talent through the ranks to be able. I hate this military terminology. I'm going to not do that. To move up the ladder within an organization. Like that doesn't exist and isn't mature enough in the games industry yet, and really should be. I hear a lot of stories from developers that I'm close with who've volunteered on things that we work with regularly, who have said that they have to move studios to be able to get a promotion because their manager, essentially their manager doesn't have the tools or the understanding in order to be able to accurately and properly support the members of people in their team to be able to do their best work and to move up within the company. The company perhaps itself doesn't even have the mature policies in place to be able to actually show managers how people move up within the company, which means actually a lot of this time it's rely on luck and nepotism. Which is why we're compounding these problems of having, middle-class white guys in senior leadership positions, because the managers are all middle-class white guys. So naturally, their friends are probably going to be middle-class white guys too. The people that they're pally with after work. So those who get promoted and move up with the company are those who are close personally, not just professionally, with their managers. And people who are perhaps from underrepresented groups are less likely to get promoted. We can see that in the skill search report and in the UK census, where actually people from underrepresented groups are much more likely to either make diagonal moves to other organizations or to leave games completely. And that's because
that being said, to be honest, I recognize that so I personally had to leave most of my jobs in order to get promoted or other. In every case, that doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. But I'm just highlighting. I do recognize it. In particular, I recognize it from the point of view where there is an inherent problem in organisations, no matter even big organisations like, let's say, 3. When I left 3, they had to hire 5 people to cover what I was covering. Now, that doesn't mean all of them were full 5. I wasn't doing 5 people job back to back. I wasn't doing that many hours. But my point was more when you have an organisation and they become reliant on an individual, it becomes very difficult for that individual to be promoted because the cost to the organisation for promoting them is disproportionate. And that is going to happen. It's going to happen. But it also highlights such a degree of importance that you guys were solving with the Kickstart scheme, where I think that we as an industry in general need to look at that junior to senior, senior to lead, and management skills as a separate track. That's where roles like the accelerators, I think all of these things together combined are such a critical way of looking at the way we operate. And I mean, I'd be just interested to see, where do you look for hope? Where's your aspirational? Because when I think about it, I'm thinking about people like Hutch or SpaceApe or Mediatonic guys, and I know people there who the leadership there are just brilliant people who want to do the best thing by their teams. We had Sean give a talk. In fact, we've had Sean and Paul and Simon at Space, all talking about their experiences. Paul didn't. It's so rare to get Paul from Insonic to talk, but he did an amazing talk about mental health support. Just brilliant, utterly brilliant, and really inspirational. Really, but really laid home to the point that the culture of the organisation is not just a combination of the people; it's how we support those people. But what gives you hope?
Oh, there are so many things in so many places. I definitely have, in the time that I've worked at Intergames, become somewhat cynical about the sector and the industry because of its many challenges and how we face them all the time. And I think that ultimately there isn't enough of an open discourse about the challenges and kind of saying up front, here's what we're doing wrong and here's how we need to solve it. But that doesn't mean by any stretch that I don't come across every day, like organizations and people doing incredible things that do give me hope for the future. I mentioned already, like yours truly as an example. I think that they're a shining example about how a small organization can really invest in becoming a progressive organization. They could just do things business as usual, take on clients and ensure the big financial success of their organization. But from day one, they said, we want to do things differently. And I think that's going to become more true as time goes on. There's going to be more smaller organizations making an amazing name for themselves. And this is the amazing thing as well, is that, organizations actually kind of shooting themselves in the foot from a business development perspective, from not kind of putting a stake in the ground about the things that they care about. Because once you do that, people start to take notice of you. And, everybody wants to work with you, yours truly now. They're really, really popular and brilliant organization. And partly that's because they kind of wore their ethics on their sleeve and said, this is how we're going to do things, and we're going to do things differently. So small organizations like that give me a lot of hope. And also, as I said, things like the Video Games Ambassadors, the fact that is still a thriving network of nearly 1,000 people who regularly support and give their time to educational projects across the country, that gives me hope every single day. Like, whether you may not see it manifested in actual kind of the corporates and the big organizations, you can guarantee that the people working in those organizations really do care a lot about supporting the next generation of talent. And in time, those people will become more senior folks and those who can pull the strings within organizations, and we'll start to see some kind of bigger change then. I don't want to say too many names, because if I say too many names of people or organizations, I'm going to feel bad about the people that I didn't mention.
Oh, I know, and I fall into that trap all the time, and I often say the names wrong because I've forgotten they've changed name and stuff like that because I'm old. But I mean, I suppose for me, what I find delightful is if you are a established old form person like me, who's been around forever, there's something joyful about mentoring and supporting other people, because not only do you get to see people flourish and thrive and stuff like that, but and it's nice to be a part of it. That's not the thing. I learned so much about how to do my job better because I'm talking to other people about how they do their job. And by having to try and talk to them strategically about how to take this bunch of my experience and apply it to their current circumstances, I'm absolutely transactionally working through what I need to understand to support them, which helps me understand what I know better. So the next time I talk to the next person, I do that better still. And also when I have to deal with that problem, I do it better still. The learning that you get from being a supporter, mentor, etc. for people, I don't mean anything grand by any of that, by the way, but the value of that is disproportional. Not, I love the fact that someone benefits, but if you want to be selfish about it, you're going to benefit yourself at least as much by being involved in that process, in my opinion. Is that kind of make sense to how other people respond to it?
Yes, of course, definitely. The thing that we always try and get across in a lot of the work that we're doing, and I think we really I think we are starting to move past this now, of this discourse around social impact work and supporting education, supporting entry level, building a more diverse, inclusive industry, mentorship, leadership development. All of this stuff isn't about just doing good. It's about, okay, I can feel feel better about the fact that I've done something socially impactful today, it's actually good for business.
I get a badge.
Exactly. Sure, okay, that's great. And everybody needs those things to make sure that they feel like they're contributing to the world in a positive way. So I'm all for that. I just think, for us as well, a lot of the conversation is, people say, oh, we really want to support junior talent, and it's like, you shouldn't just want to because it's a good thing to do. You should want to because you're missing out by not doing it. That by not fostering a culture within your organization of volunteering and mentorship and supporting social impact projects, you're denying people within your organization the opportunity to develop their skills further, to become a more confident public speaker, to become a more confident leader, to become a better mentor and cement their own learnings about their own work that they do, to then be a better mentor to people internally within their own organization, to build a grassroots talent pipeline into the organization. Those who had that in place pre-Brexit are going to be happy that they had them then, because it's going to be a lot easier for them to find great talent domestically than those who've been relying on finding it internationally. So all of this stuff is good for business. And obviously, there's so much data out there and reports about how building diverse teams is good for business in terms of fostering a more inclusive and healthy working culture and bringing more creative and interesting ideas into your organization. So we're beyond the point now when it should be about like, okay, this is just a good thing to do that we do on the side. It should be embedded in how you do business, because ultimately,
In fact, I'm going to take it a little further. So one of the things that I often hear people say, but then you train these people up and they just go and leave you. Yeah, but if they leave you, as we've had people leave us, better skilled, more able, more, able to get into those roles that they've always craved, and they still feel great about you, guess what? That's where your next deal, your next contract, your next, support, the next investors are going to get coming from, because by giving back to people, giving to the team around you, you're building a better connection with the rest of the industry. And when someone talks to someone who's worked for us, I hope, and I know it has happened, that they talk about us in the best possible light. And I don't think that's a thing you can underestimate. I know that there are people out there who will immediately say, talk to Oscar and Ella because we did this. And I think that is this illusion that we can hold on to people by not teaching them stuff, or hold on to people because we don't expose them to the rest of the industry, is nonsense. All you're doing is the people who are going to leave you anyway, because if they're talented enough to leave you anyway, they will, because they're going to have their own dreams. Let's tarnish their time with us. Let's make the most of it. And let's make sure that when they leave us, they think they want to believe in us still, even then. And that is, I think, massively important.
Absolutely. For us as an organization, we're accidentally, a stepping stone into the games industry and into studio work. People come and work for us and then go off to do other things. And, almost every single person who has worked for Into Games and now works in various studios and other places has been nominated or won a national industry award. And we can take that and be like, okay, we're helping develop talent and foster, this idea of how the industry should be. And they're taking those learnings into other organizations. And I'd be lying if I said that hadn't helped us then support other projects and things. We have a huge number of people across the industry that don't work for us that believe in what we do and actively support our work, because we've built a reputation as an organization that's kind and cares and goes the extra mile. Doing this work is ultimately really good for business.
And at the end of the day, I think you just described what success looks like to you.
Exactly. And beyond that, actually, as well, I think like if people are worried about how they're going to keep their staff, like just salary is not the only thing, right? Like if the skill search report that just came out a couple of months ago is the number one thing that people cared about in the games industry when they looked for a job was work-life balance. So there's more things that you can do in an organization to keep a hold of your talent beyond just paying them money. Things like great
Yeah.
maternity
Let's
and
give them
paternity
crunch.
policies. Exactly, like good leave, remote working policies, flexible hours, all of these different things that are becoming the norm across more progressive organizations. When game studios start doing those, you've got, studios like Bulkhead Interactive moving to a 4-day work week. They might not be able to compete with the might of some of the other or larger organizations and studios and IP, but they'll certainly be getting some brilliant people right now because they're committed as an organization to giving their staff a good work-life balance, which is actually the number one priority for people in games. So,
well, I have to say, those studios that have been insisting on them going back to the office have really helped my recruitment. I thank them for that stupidity. We're a fully remote studio. Oh, well, not studio, but publisher. But the fact is that my recruitment's got easier since the pandemic because these crazy people think they can lock people in an office and get away with it. Anyway, we are out of time. I have to say thank you so much, Brandon, for being part of that process. Really appreciate it. Is there one thing you'd like to, for example, if somebody wants to get more involved in the video games ambassadors and things like that, what should they be doing?
There's so many things. The video games ambassadors, for anyone listening who isn't signed up, it's a great first step to be able to just give back to supporting a fairer and more inclusive industry. And as we said, a really great way to build your own skills as a developer or professional as well by, cementing your own learnings about things. Keep an eye on what we're up to. Our strategy for the next 2 years is going to be out very soon over the next couple of weeks with loads and loads of ways to get involved in the work that we do, including some big, massive changes for the sector that we hope to see in a big national consultation around skills development. So if any of the thing that I've said over this last hour has sounded interesting and you want to learn more and support the work that we do, just get in touch with me, Brandon@intergames.org. It's the easiest way. There's so many things that you can do.
And I can't but reinforce that. Like I said, my involvement hasn't been huge, but I have been dipping in and out of the Slack group for a long time, it feels like, and it always ends up being useful. And there's some amazing people in that group and really supportive. Please feel free to check that out. Brandon, thank you so much for your time. And as I say, this has been your Game Dev London podcast. Thank you very much for listening to us. If you enjoyed this or you found this interesting, please like, subscribe. As Brandon said, please check out intergames.org. And obviously, if you want to chat more and discuss more things with us, then don't forget there's the Game Dev London Discord group as well. So come and talk to us. We are here, a community of game developers who love making games. And so, without any further ado, this has been your Game Dev London podcast. Goodbye.